Hi, good morning all. Welcome to Diademy IAS. In this session, we are going to discuss some tips to prepare poems for English literature optional preparation. You know, we have 60 poems in UPSC syllabus, and we know that other aspirants normally feel some hectic work regarding with the preparation of poem. When we compare novel, drama, and we have literary terms and literary movements and all. So, in this video, I would like to share some strategy you have to follow when you start reading poems and when you start preparing or making notes for the English literature optional. So let's discuss about some strategy, and I would like to give around 12 important areas, the 12 important points you have to keep in your mind when you prepare poems. So we can quickly, simply explain about how to start, how to read, how to make notes for the English literature optional area poems. So here, I would like to share the important points one by one. Based on that, you can read the poem. So this is the 12 important poems are applicable in all types of poem. Okay, maybe it's a sonnet, maybe it's an epic, a long narrative. Whatever the poem, it's not a matter. You can use this strategy, you can use these steps to identify, to understand poems first. So let's discuss about number one. The number one important point you have to understand this. Understand the poem's meaning. So that is the first step we have to do when we start reading poems. What is the meaning of understanding the poem's meaning? Every poem title will reveal some historic, religious, contextual aspect. We can take the example. I can give the meaning of, relic, and we have canonization. We have canonization, the poem canonization. We have the poem Paradise Lost. And we have the poem Tintern Abbey. So what is the meaning? What is the meaning? How can, what is the, actually what it means this poem, understand the meaning of the poem, of the title of the poem. That means you have to understand how and why the title mentioned in the poem. Actually, the title of the poem is the key or the path to understand the elaborate ideas of the poem which explains in that particular area. So, understand, Tintern Abbey. Actually, Tintern Abbey is a place, near the place there is a historical aspect there. The relic is, that means, all these are some religious aspect there in relic. Canonization. The another poem in our syllabus, canonization is a religious term. So, why the poet used that particular title and what is the relevance of that title and how the title leads the poem. So in this way, this is the first step. The first step you have to understand about every poem. You can take every poem in this way. So that is the first step you have to do. And write about something about that title. What's the title meaning and how it originated and what is the context, religious, historical, then imaginative, then cultural, social, political. What is the relevance of that particular title? Paradise Lost. It's the best example. Then Rape of the Lock. Then, the different poems are there. Then Cousin on a Swing by A.K. Ramanujan. Whatever the poem, take this method and do write something about the title. So that is the first step. And we can discuss the second step. That is, read the poem several times. Normally, most of the aspirants do that. They just open the poem and we will start reading. Okay, we will start read all this poem and that line by line. But within a single reading, we can't judge and we can't analyze the poem. You know, every poem includes some inner ideas, lot of interpretations there, analysis there, some mythology there, political, historical, societal, all the different multi-dimensional interpretations we have to give in that particular poem. So read the poem multiple times. Minimum 2 or 3 times you have to read a single poem. Then only you will get a wide perspective about that poem. So do it. So this is very important for our UPSC preparation, because when you analyze the question papers, you can get an idea. That means the poem is not just about the summary, it's not just about the theme. It is like, we have to approach in an interpretive. That means the perception, how the poet compare this poem with the different layers. So that is a strategy you have to adopt. Then the third one, summarize the poem. So that is a third step you have to do. When you cover the poem, after completing this poem, read the poem multiple times, minimum 2 or 3 times, then make a summary. The summary not about the short, it's about the elaborate way. How the poet gives the idea, how the poet explains a particular thing, like that. The summary, contextual based summary, that is very important for the preparation. And the fourth one is paraphrase stanza by stanza. That is very important thing. When you take a poem, you can find this. That means, stanza by stanza is very important. That means stanza means, stanza varies the line. Maybe 6 line, maybe 7 line, maybe 4 line, maybe 5 line. Okay. So give more importance to stanza. And in the stanza, we have line by line explanation we have. Okay. Line by line. You have to give line by line interpretation, line by line explanation. And each line may includes different types of mythological characters, maybe historical references. For example, we can take the poem Resolution and Independence or Lease Gatherer. In that poem, there are 2 writers mentioned. That means, Resolution and Independence, the poem. Resolution and Independence. Okay, Resolution and Independence. In that poem, we can see 2 writers, William Wordsworth referred to name. Okay, so 2 poets' name. Then Chesterton and Robert Burns. So these 2 writers' name mentioned in that poem. So why the poet mentioned that poet's name? And what is the relevance in that? What is the relevance of that writers in the poem of William Wordsworth? And how it mentioned? How through these writers, how William Wordsworth explains about the society in romantic time. So that's what you have to give the line by line attention when you read the poem. The next important step you have to follow, that is, identify the key literary devices. That is very, very important thing. That means when you read a poem, you have to identify the terms, literary devices used in a particular poem. So that means, the important theme, like the important tone, how the poet used the particular devices in that particular lines. For example, what are the metaphors, what are the simile, what are the foreshadowing of this poem. Then how the poet explains, or how the poet, you know, the different areas of comparisons, analysis, you know. So this type of explanation is, hyperbole, exaggeration, how the poet exaggerates something, and what is the relevance of that, and why he uses that technique in that poem. So in this way you have to approach. The next important method, the next step is consider tone and mood of the poem. So that is very important thing, tone and mood. Tone and mood is different. Tone of the poem is the what the poet means that through that poem. For example, we can say that the same poem we already said. That means the poem Relic by John Donne. And that poem is a metaphysical poem, and John Donne is a metaphysical poet. And what's that, the relic, the tone of that poem? The tone of the poem, that means the love, the spiritual love, beyond the physical, beyond material. There is a love, that is the tone. At the same time, there is a melancholic tone there. The same sense when suppose in the sense of a reader, that term changed into mood. Mood is relating with the reader only, but tone is relating with the writer. So in that way, we have to approach a particular work. So for example, you can take the example like Least Gatherer. The poem is in a melancholic tone. Tintern Abbey. So that means the initial part of the poem itself, we get a lot of ideas about this poem. And that poem initially explains about the nature, but gradually this poem reached into a melancholic in tone. Odd intimation of immortality from the recollection of early childhood by William Wordsworth. It's a melancholic in tone. That time, that when you read the poem, the same time you have to identify what is the tone of the poem and what is the mood of the poem. So that's very important, and you have to add some lines to justify the tone and mode of this poem in your answer sheet. Then identify the central theme. That's another step. The next step of reading poem is identify the theme. What is the theme? Actually, what is the meaning of the word theme? Theme is the all about content of the poem, from the beginning to the end, which is the main core concept or the core area. Okay, the core area the poet tries to convey. So that is the theme of the poem. So theme of the poem is very important, and you have to write, or you have to identify the theme, and based on that, when we refer about theme, we have to understand about motif as well. What is motif? The motif will leads to the theme. That means motif is the different tone there, different images there, imagery there. So that's what motif. That means the motif will give more clarity on theme. So that is, give that your attention to based on that motif and theme. So that's very important. And the next one is interpret symbols. Symbolism. We can say that the poet or in literature, we can see the poet, the writer use some symbols to indicate the meaning, to indicate the idea about the context of that particular literary work. Symbols, flowers. Writers use flowers, sky, stars, moon, different types of, objects, natural things. Then which indicates to compare the emotion or compare the character in a particular work. So symbols, which are the symbols used in a particular poem, find out this and write down the important symbols. So with the help of the sentence, okay, you have to add the important lines of the poem. in your answer which gives the details of symbols. So whatever you are giving based on this point, you have to add the relevant lines into your answers. That means, a one line, put an inverted comma and write and elaborate this, interpret this. So that's the method you have to adopt in the preparation for poems in UPSC level. Next one, research the poet's life. That's very important actually. From the beginning time itself, we will read about the poet and the work. So that's a very important thing. But we have to give the introduction. We have to give the introduction of the author in the very first paragraph. That is introduction of the, that means the introduction of the answer. But here we have to add some poet's life, because every literary work has some connection with the writer's life, the author's life. How the author mentioned a particular thing in this context, in the stanza, in the particular part of the poem. So, in your answer, you have to add some content based on the life of the poet or the author and how it referred, how the poet refers in this part of a particular part of the stanza. So that's very important. And next one is relate the poem to its literary period. So that's very important. We have the romantic writings, William Wordsworth, 9 poems we have in UPSC syllabus. And when we take the example like, composed upon the Westminster Bridge, and we have John Donne poem, we have, that is the category, the Renaissance at the same time, metaphysical, Then we have the modern writers in the syllabus and their works there. So, we can say that in English literature, from the syllabus, we can identify about the periods from Renaissance to the postmodernism, modernism, feministic approach, So, all the different periods are there. So, based on that, you have to give some clarity about how a particular literary work or a particular poem, how it influences the period. So, how this poem is a reflection of the period. So, that's we have to do. Okay. So, that is what here relate to the poem in literary period. Next one, highlight the key passages. That's we already discussed. That means during the answer writing time, you have to add some relevant quotations, relevant lines of the poem in order to justify your answer. Okay. For example, if you want to reveal about the symbolism in the poem, then give 1 or 2 lines to justify your answer about how symbolism applied in the particular literary work or a particular poem. So do it. So this is also a strategy when you prepare poems. The next one is practice essay. That is the last one strategy. That means after finishing the poem, that means you have to do all this. Understand the title, about the author, about the devices, about the period, about the theme, symbols, poet's life, and about the passage also. And all this, after all these, practice or write along. That means, try to write maximum about that poem. That means minimum 1 essay you have to write. In that essay, try to add the maximum content involving all this, meaning, title relevance, periodic importance, theme, motive, then tone, mode. So all these you have to include and write an essay, practice it. You need not to collect the question for that. Take a paper and pen, write what are the important theme you got from the poem, and what is the relevance of that poem, what are the imagery used in that poem, what are the symbols used in that poem, and what are the devices there. So write it. Then after that you can refer the previous questions and how the question asked, what are the strategy we have to adopt from our own references. So this is what you have to do regarding with the poem and the preparation. So this is what I want to share about the poem. So this is what the structure and the method you have to follow when you read poems. Thank you. And we can discuss the next part of the topic in the next video. Thank you. Thank you so much.